Hello and welcome to the Matthew Rocky Show for this week of April 4th. Thanks for tuning in for the podcast this week, and we are in a stretch of a little bit of unusual episodes compared to how a normal episode plays out. Last week, of course, a little bit more conversation focused, and this week we are going to be solely news focused. Also going to be a little bit shorter of a podcast than normal. I just want to touch on the story I did mention last week, though, as we get started this week. The election integrity that was challenged or brought up before the Wisconsin Assembly's Committee on Campaigns and Elections by the public interest organization True the Vote were able to reconstruct the movement of ballot box intermediaries in the 2020 election by using 10 trillion unique cell phone pings or cell phone movements. And I just want to add that note to the story of how that was accomplished. You can read the full article on that by visiting the Epic Times. They've got the full article entitled "Election Watchdog Finds 137,500 Ballots Unlawfully Trafficked in Wisconsin." Let's get into the headlines from this week. The U.S. Senate on April 7th voted to confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, capping weeks of tough scrutiny and heated debates over the nominee's qualifications. The 53-47 vote, presided over by Vice President Kamala Harris, included the support of all 50 Democrats and 3 Republicans, Senator Mitt Romney from Utah, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and Susan Collins from Maine. In the hours leading up to the vote, Democrats emphasized Jackson's qualifications to serve and said that her confirmation would be a glass-shattering achievement for America, unquote. Also, the U.S. Senate this week, they voted Thursday morning as well to end normal trade relations with Russia and Belarus and to bar Russian oil imports into the United States in response to the nation's invasion of Ukraine. The bill to end normal trade relations with Russia and Belarus passed in a 100-0 vote, a rare event in an increasingly divided Washington. It's a big deal that we are finally getting them done, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said on Wednesday after he announced the legislation. Now, I wish this could have happened sooner, but after weeks of talks with the other side, it's important that we have found a path forward. The measures have already won the support of President Joe Biden, who has long called for Congress to take up such legislation. In March, Biden announced an oil ban, which is now codified by the support of the Senate. Joe Biden, at his son Hunter's request in 2017, wrote a college recommendation letter for the son of a Chinese executive who did business with Hunter, leaked emails suggest. The emails, purportedly from Hunter Biden's laptop and obtained by Fox News, show exchanges in early 2017 between Hunter Biden, his business partners at the private equity firm Rosemont Seneca, and Jonathan Li, CEO of Chinese investment firm BHR. At the time of the initial email, Joe Biden was vice president. In an email dated January 3rd, 2017, Li wrote to Hunter Biden and his associates at Rosemont Seneca, Devin Archer and Jim Bulger, stating, quote, "Gentlemen, please find the attached resume of my son, Chris Lee. He is applying the following colleges for this year," unquote. Lee then listed Brown University, Cornell University, and New York University before requesting, quote, "Please can you provide some advice for his applications," unquote. In a reply, Bulger acknowledged receipt of the resume, stating, quote, "Let's see how we can be helpful here to Chris," unquote. A few weeks later, on February 18th, 2017, Rosemont Seneca's president, Eric Sherwin, sent an email to Lee copying Hunter Biden, Archer, and Bulger. Sherwin wrote, quote, "Jonathan, Hunter asked me to send you a copy of the recommendation letter that he asked his father to write on behalf of Christopher for Brown University," unquote. Sherwin then assured Lee that the original letter had gone by FedEx directly to Brown University president Christina Paxson and should reach her, quote, the following Tuesday at the latest, unquote. In his reply to Sherwin, Lee acknowledged the help of not only Sherwin, but also Hunter Biden. Quote, and Hunter, thank you very much too. All the best to you, unquote, Lee wrote. Hunter Biden was an unpaid board member of BHR until about October 2019. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky accused Russia of being insincere in its peace talks that have occurred since Russia's invasion of Ukraine with their continued bombardment of key Ukrainian cities. Zelensky said in an address to the Spanish parliament on Tuesday that Russia, quote, is not serious about peace, unquote, and pleaded for Europe to do more to stop Moscow's offensive. Quote, we Ukrainians are committed to peace and a conflict-free environment, unquote. Zelensky said, adding that Ukraine has repeatedly called on Russia to agree to a ceasefire and resolve differences through talks. Quote, Ukraine speaks about it every day throughout the days of this invasion. But the war continues. Russia is not serious about peace, unquote. Many who have not chosen to take the COVID-19 vaccine have cited religious objections. Now, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf's administration wants church leaders to bring vaccination events into churches. Pennsylvania's public health leaders want to, quote, harness the power of community trust in statewide faith-based organizations, unquote, to convince folks to get a COVID-19 shot. That is according to the mission statement of the faith-based organization Coalition, which is being formed under the state's Department of Health and is expected to launch April 11th. The state aims to reduce vaccine hesitancy through the, quote, local innovations in vaccine equity in Pennsylvania, unquote. The project, also known as Live PA, which is a grant program that pays churches and nonprofits to speak with their people and persuade them to get vaccinated. That is $10 for each person-to-person outreach, including direct phone calls, direct text messages, direct social media messages, door-knocking campaigns, and anything that involves one-on-one dialogue promoting the COVID-19 shot. The church or other nonprofit gets another $10 for each person who does get vaccinated. At least 18 people were shot and 2 killed in about a dozen separate shooting incidents across Chicago last weekend, said the Chicago Police Department in a Monday update. Authorities say that there have been data provided by the Chicago Police suggests that Chicago has seen fewer shootings and murders so far in 2022, although other crimes like carjackings are up from the previous year. Homicides are down about 7% year over year, the Sun-Times reported, while shooting victims are down 15%. However, the data suggests that property crimes are up significantly in 2022 as compared with the previous year. For example, there have been 3,076 motor vehicle thefts reported so far this year, compared to 2,048 during the same time period in 2021. For weeks, headlines and broadcasts have blared the supposed dismay of Walt Disney Company workers over Florida's new parental rights and education law, which prohibits schools from discussing sexual orientation or gender identity with students under a third grade. Some Disney employees, though, say fear is keeping those in favor of the law from speaking out, even though it's likely the majority of Disney workers. Passions have flared across Twitter in talk show interviews and at Hollywood events. Opponents of the new law, which takes effect July 1st, suggest it whittles the rights of Floridians identifying as LGBTQ, and that Disney's escalating stand against it represents a fight to preserve those rights across the country and around the globe. But those expressions of upset not only misrepresent the law, but they also falsely characterize the silent majority of Disney workers, employees said. Many media outlets have knowingly exaggerated the numbers of Disney employees protesting what opponents misleadingly have dubbed the quote, "don't say gay bill" employees say. Disney representatives did not respond to a comment at press time. Black Lives Matter co founder Patrice Cullors has spoken against a report that reveals her organization purchased a $5.8 million mansion in Southern California, calling the story a quote, racist and sexist attack on the movement. According to the April 4th report by New York Magazine, the 6,500 square foot California estate was bought in October of 2020 using money that had been donated to Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, which acts as a fundraising umbrella for BLM activism. It's unclear who leads the foundation since Collins stepped down from her position in May of 2021 amid criticism over its lack of financial transparency. The ownership of the house, which comes with a half dozen bedrooms and bathrooms, several fireplaces, a sound stage, a pool and bungalow, and parking for more than 20 cars, was transferred to an LLC in Delaware so that the new owner's identity would not be disclosed, the magazine claimed. In a statement sent to the magazine on April 1st, a BLM board member said the foundation had always planned to disclose the California house, which they had bought, quote, with the intention for it to serve as housing and studio space for recipients of the Black Joy Creators Fellowship, unquote. The said fellowship, which, quote, provides recording resources and dedicated space for Black creatives to launch content online and in real life focused on abolition, healing justice, urban agriculture and food justice, pop culture, activism, and politics, unquote, was only announced at April 2nd, the following morning. Amid a new round of scrutiny over how BLM spends its donation money, callers called the magazine's mansion story a, quote, despicable abuse of a platform that intended to provide information to the public, unquote. Commodity prices could rise by 40% and will likely continue to go higher, according to a note from JP Morgan Chase on April 7th, as raw materials hit a record high last month following Western sanctions on Russia due to its invasion of Ukraine. Russia is a main supplier for up to 10% of global energy production and about 20% of global wheat production. The commodities affected include oil, which is already up 33% from the same month the previous year, while natural gas has gone up by 65% since the invasion roiled the markets. Metals, including gold, such as copper, are up 7% from 2021, while wheat has surged upward by 33%. The bank said it was reviewing the long term positioning in commodities by global investors and compared that to allocations in cash, stocks, and bonds. Turning now to recent gubernatorial actions across the U.S., the Alabama legislature passed a measure to ban certain transgender procedures and substances for minors, sending it to Governor Kay Ivey's desk for signature. The bill advanced out of the House on April 7th by a 66 to 28 vote, mostly along party lines. It was passed out of the Senate in February. The Alabama Vulnerable Child Compassion and Protection Act, also referred to as SB 184, would make it a felony to provide certain medical approaches, such as hormone treatment, puberty blockers, and gender identity affirming surgeries, to those under the age of 18. Under the proposed legislation, medical providers would face up to 10 years in prison if they are found to have provided such services. The bill would also ban school staff from withholding information from the parent or legal guardian when a minor's perception of his or her gender or sex is inconsistent with the minor's sex. In other news, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, has asked the state Supreme Court to immediately declare that abortion is a right protected by the Michigan Constitution. The first term governor, who is seeking re election this November, used her executive authority to bypass the lower courts in order to expedite the state Supreme Court's consideration of her lawsuit. In a statement released on April 7th, Whitmer said, quote, "In the coming weeks, we will learn if the U.S. Supreme Court decides to overturn Roe v. Wade. If Roe is overturned, abortion could become illegal in Michigan and deprive Michigan women of the ability to make critical health care decisions for themselves. If the U.S. Supreme Court refuses to protect the constitutional right to an abortion, the Michigan Supreme Court should step in," she said. Conservative political strategist Jamie Rowe of Macomb County said, quote, "It's ironic that Whitmer is asking the same court that took away her dictatorial powers during the COVID lockdown to rule by fiat in this case," unquote. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed SB 988, the No Patient Left Alone Act, on April 6th, guaranteeing Floridians the fundamental right of in person visits with family members and other loved ones in healthcare facilities, even during a crisis. The patient visitation rights measure requires that in person visits be allowed in long term care facilities, hospices, and hospitals, with a stipulation that no healthcare facility can ask for proof of vaccine status. It also allows visitors to hug their loved ones, something that wasn't permitted in the past 2 years. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many terminally ill patients weren't able to be with their loved ones in the end of life situations, something that the governor called, quote, "fundamentally wrong," unquote. Quote, "I think when you look back over the past 2 years, one of the most heartbreaking elements of this was shutting people out of being with their loved ones at really critical times in their lives," unquote. DeSantis said that to a press conference in Naples, Florida. Kentucky Governor Andy Bashar on Wednesday vetoed a bill that would have barred biological male students from participating in women's and girls' sports in public and private schools across the state. The Republican backed measure, titled the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, quote, "discriminates against transgender children," unquote, the Democratic governor said in a veto letter signed Wednesday, noting that the bill most likely violates the U.S. Constitution's equal protection rights and it offers no example of an unfair advantage by transgender students. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has also vowed to send illegal immigrants from his state to Delaware, which is the home state of President Joe Biden. Quote, "What we're doing in Florida is saying we're not going to let the recklessness of those policies impact our state. If businesses or contractors are dumping people who are illegal into Florida from southern Texas, we're going to go after their ability to do business in Florida." That's what DeSantis said at a signing event in Florida on Wednesday, referring to federal immigration policies. Alleging that federal officials fly in immigrants from the U.S.-Mexico border to Florida at, quote, 2 in the morning, unquote, DeSantis said that Florida now has, quote, "money where we can reroute them to sanctuary states like Delaware, and we're going to do that to make sure we're keeping people safe here," unquote. Biden currently has a home in Delaware, and he was a senator in the state for decades. On a similar line, Texas Governor Greg Abbott on Wednesday said that his government will provide charter buses and flights to transport illegal immigrants released from federal custody into its territory to Washington, D.C. The Republican made the remarks during a press briefing, saying that his state on the southern border has been, quote, "overwhelmed by hordes of illegal immigrants who are being dropped off by the Biden administration," unquote. Abbott told reporters, quote, "We are sending the illegal immigrants to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border," unquote. The measure comes in response to the lifting of Title 42 by the Biden administration last week. Oregon's youngest students will experience a new emphasis on race, identity, and equality as the state incorporates ethnic studies requirements into the social studies curriculum for all students in K through 12. They will be the first state to do so. The new focus stems from an Oregon law passed in 2017 that directed the Oregon Department of Education to develop standards to, quote, improve cultural competency and promote critical thinking with regards to histories, contributions, and perspectives of ethnic and social minority groups, unquote. The standards will permeate the study of, quote, civic and government, economics, geography, financial literacy, history, and social science analysis, unquote, according to the department. Published in March of 2021, the new standards are now being adopted in many schools across the state and will be a requirement for the 2025-2026 school year. Already, Oregon teachers, staff, and administrators are being trained on the elements of ethnic studies, which the department cites as, quote, an indispensable tool for dismantling what activists describe as, quote, America's racial caste system, unquote. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem signed an executive order on April 5th that bars the teaching of critical race theory in K through 12 education in the state. The order states that the Department of Education shall not compel employees, students, or teachers to, quote, personally affirm, adopt, or adhere to inherently decisive concepts, unquote. The order also directs the Education Secretary to review all policies within DOE to, quote, identify if any promote inherently divisive concepts, unquote. Such policies, materials, or training should be ended no later by October 1st of this year. Colorado's governor on April 4th signed a bill into law that makes permanent the right for women to get abortions. Colorado Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat, signed HB 221279, also known as the Reproductive Health Equity Act, after the Democratic-controlled state legislature approved the legislation. The bill states that, quote, every individual has a fundamental right to make decisions about the individual's reproductive health care, including the fundamental right to refuse or use contraception, unquote. And that a, quote, pregnant individual has a fundamental right to continue a pregnancy and give birth or to have an abortion, unquote. Additionally, the legislation says fetuses or unborn children do not have an independent or derivative right. Former President Donald Trump has endorsed former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin after she announced a bid for the congressional seat left vacant by a sudden death. Trump said, quote, wonderful patriot Sarah Palin of Alaska just announced that she is running for Congress, and that means there will be a true American first fighter on the ballot to replace the late and legendary Congressman Don Young, unquote. Young, a Republican from Alaska who held the only House seat, died on March 18th at the age of 88. Trump noted that Palin endorsed him when he ran for president in 2016, before continuing his praise of the former Republican vice presidential nominee. Researchers have discovered microplastics deep in the lungs of living humans for the first time. Scientists at Hull York Medical School in England published their findings in the journal Science of the Total Environment, the first such study to show microplastics in lung tissue of live people. Microplastics are extremely small plastic particles composed of mixtures of polymers and functional additives that measure less than 5 millimeters in size and are generally unintentionally released into the environment because of disposal and breakdown of larger consumer products or industrial waste. Researchers in the study collected lung tissue from living patients undergoing surgical procedures at Castle Hill Hospital and Hull University Teaching Hospitals, NHS Trust, before filtering it to see what was present. They observed 39 microplastics in 11 of the 13 lung tissue samples tested, a figure that is significantly higher than any other previous laboratory tests. Researchers identified 12 types of microplastics in total, which are commonly found in bottles, packaging, clothes, and rope, along with other manufacturing processes. And one note from sports as we wrap up, the Kansas Jayhawks won their 4th title in the largest comeback in NCAA basketball championship history with a 72-69 win over North Carolina at the Superdome in New Orleans on Monday night. Kansas coach Bill Self won his first championship in 2008 and gets his second in his 19th season. Kansas came back from a deficit of 16 points, surpassing the 1963 title game when Loyola overcame a 15-point deficit to beat Cincinnati on the last shot, 60-58. Well, that'll do it for the Matthew Rocky Show for this week. Thanks for joining me, and just a reminder, we'll be back to a normal show next week for the week of April 11th. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next time here on the Matthew Rocky Show.